What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Odd Shopper channel. Today, we're talking some college basketball. We're closing out the opening weekend of March Madness with Sunday, March the 24th. Before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. We're also brought to you by Bet365 with a limited time offer for those of you in Kentucky, Ohio, New Jersey, Virginia, Iowa, Colorado, Louisiana, Indiana, Arizona, and North Carolina. If I just said your state, you've got some money coming your way. What you'll do, click the link below, make your first deposit of at least $10, $5 wager on any team, total market, whatever you want, and you get $150 in the form of bonus bets. You must be 21 or older to play. You must be 18 in Kentucky. If you or somebody knows a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Limited time offer, so make sure you take advantage of this, especially ahead of the final day of the opening weekend and ahead of the Sweet 16. All right, so we have 8 matchups on deck, some really fun ones. And we'll kick things off with one that's near and dear to my heart. We have Colorado taking on Marquette. So in this game, got my hometown team, Marquette, taking on kind of the darling of my betting the last couple of weeks in Colorado. Right now, Colorado sitting as a 4.5-point underdog. This has moved. It was 3.5 even as early as this morning. But Marquette now fully healthy. Tyler Kolek returned in their most recent game. Full allotment. Guy was in double figures. Looked no limitations really whatsoever for Tyler Kolek. Awesome game for him. In Colorado, it's the same story. They've been a little healthier for a while now, but this is a team that had injuries to Cody Williams. De Silva's missed time for Colorado. So they're finally playing with a full complement of players, a full roster. And this team has been tricky to play with recently. We just saw them in their most recent contest go complete shootout with Florida, just shot for shot. And then Marquette, they were down to Western Kentucky in the first half and end up outlasting them. And really by the end, they kind of just demolished them and covered the initial spread despite losing at halftime. Just pretty crazy stuff there. But as far as the matchups go on these individual teams, with Colorado, it's going to be largely height. This team is 33rd in effective height. Marquette might surprise you. They don't have the tallest center. Usually it's Oso, Ben Gold, when Oso's coming out for spells. But Marquette doesn't rebound that well despite being 25th in height themselves. The rebounding gap here is 9th to 283. And I think this interior presence could be a matchup advantage for Colorado. It's not just De Silva on the inside. Eddie Lampkin is giving them awesome minutes, and he's a big physical interior player, which doesn't match up that well against Oso Ighodaro, who's more of a move big man. But with Colorado, you have bodies on the interior, and you can't really say that about Marquette outside of Ben Gold and Oso Ighodaro. From there, you're kind of moving to Joplin, who gets into a smaller forward compared to what Colorado has on the floor. But aside from that, Colorado is the better team in effective field goal percentage. It's 18 to 22. 3-point percentage, it's 4 to Marquette's 71. They've made a huge jump. Earlier this year, they were outside the top 100. I think we all thought that would regress. But as far as the individual advantages, Colorado has still been somewhat giving on the inside. I think that's largely because of the injuries to the interior players. So seeing the 166 interior defense doesn't scare me that much, even though Marquette's been awesome at getting to the rim. What scares me a little bit is Marquette ranking 155 in 3-point defense and Colorado being 4th in the country at shooting threes. There is one major matchup advantage for Marquette that I think they can exploit routinely. It's their defense, their pressure defense, their press defense. They're 20th in the country at forcing turnovers. Colorado is 249th at turnovers committed. So they have struggled this year, not just with committing turnovers themselves, but they don't generate any turnovers. They're 295. Ultimately, I still think it's too many points with Marquette here, and I'm willing to back Colorado plus a 4.5. This is available in the market. Odd Shopper is telling me right now you can find Colorado's out there and at pretty reputable books. FanDuel's hanging a 4.5, so this is still widely available. And where I'd look, not really too interested once it gets below this, but we'll tell you a little bit more about Odd Shopper in a little bit. Next up, get to a game that's a little wider in spread. It's Utah State taking on Purdue. These games always tricky to handicap. Purdue and UConn, they both play on this slate, but they're really so much better than all the other teams in the country that you get these wide spreads and it's still tricky to handicap. That's just efficiency-wise. They can get beat on any given day. We've seen both teams lose games. We've seen Purdue just lose to Wisconsin recently. We've seen UConn lose to Creighton. It happens. As far as this individual matchup, Purdue holds every single matchup advantage. This is typically the case with Purdue. Height is going to be a big one. Their first in effective height, that's just Edie. Utah State is 100th. Who is going to play against Edie? That's always the big question when you see these Purdue games. And for Utah State, their five-man is split between Great Osobor, who also plays the 4. He's 6'8", just a massive disadvantage height-wise. Isaac Johnson, he's 7 feet tall, and Khalif Sacco, who's 6'11". Those players aren't giving you a ton on the front court. And as far as minutes go, Isaac Johnson plays 47% of the minutes. That's the last 5 games. Sacco's at 5%. If either of them get in foul trouble, you are just dealing with massive size advantages for Purdue. And the officiating with Edie has been a point of tension all season long. Sometimes people think he gets fouled and they don't call it, and then vice versa. But that's the biggest matchup advantage with Purdue, which is generally the case. Last thing I'll say on the Edie stuff, sometimes teams do dedicate extra resources to him on the interior. Last year, that was their demise. This team was outside the top 200 in three-point shooting. This year, they're second in the country in three-point shooting. That's just raw three-point percentage. So you have other options this year. Now you can kick the ball to Fletcher Loyer, who's not being asked to do as much. He's shooting 45% from 3. Mason Gillis is at 47%. Braden Smith's at 44%. Even players like Lance Jones are serviceable. He's at 36%. Trafe Kaufman-Renz at 36%. Miles Colvin's at 43%. He doesn't even get a lot of minutes. Cameron Heidi's at 46%. Some of these guys are just literally playing a handful of minutes, but you're not really looking at anyone who's a bad three-point shooter, which is a big problem when you need to dedicate extra resources to Edie. On the Utah State side, if they pull an upset, how do they do it? I'm not really sure, because this team is 267 at three-point shooting. They're 11th at interior scoring. You look at the makeup of Purdue, I think you'd rather shoot threes over the top of them than try to bang with Edie inside. And you don't really have the bodies to absorb the fouls, which is a problem for Utah State. 155 in fouls committed. Purdue's 4th in drawing fouls. You know, a team like Kentucky would be better suited to try to get Edie in foul trouble with the depth they have in 7-footers. Utah State has one 7-footer, one 6'11" guy. Neither are particularly good. And if Great Osobor is in foul trouble, their best player, this is cooked. I personally don't have a stance on this, but it's just firmly a Purdue or pass at this point, which is largely the case with Purdue and UConn at this point in the year. Next up, we go to James Madison taking on Duke. James Madison, fresh off an upset win over Wisconsin where the Badgers looked horrendous. Duke got a cover against Vermont, was a little sleepy at times. Under came way in, low-scoring game. But they found a way to get it done, and now we have a very interesting matchup here. The spread is 7. I think a lot of people might just think that's wide, given what we saw James Madison do. But this team hasn't really played anybody all season long, aside from the Michigan State upset we saw in their debut. The rest of their schedule is an absolute cakewalk. The Sun Belt is an incredibly easy strength of schedule, really weak conference. And Duke has massive advantages in every single efficiency category. They're 10th in offense, James Madison 64th. Duke's 29th on defense, James Madison 88th. Rebounding, the edge belongs to Duke. And even height, this is a massive advantage. One that Wisconsin also held, but Tyler Wall can't hit layups around the rim. With Duke, they're 10th in effective height. James Madison's 220th. James Madison is 105th at interior defense. Duke's 38th interior scoring. So you have some of the same advantages like a Purdue has. With Filipkowski and Mitchell inside, you should absolutely body the Dukes in the paint. And if that doesn't work, if they try to dedicate extra resources to Filipkowski, Duke is 13th in the country in three-point percentage. Where's James Madison? This seems pretty good at interior scoring. Again, not great when you're battling Filipkowski and Mitchell. They do shoot threes pretty well, 33rd in the country in three-point percentage. The problem here is that Duke's just a little better everywhere. If you wanted to make the argument that it's too many points and the value of the point is what gets you to James Madison, I could see that. I personally did not take a stance on this game because I do view it as being pretty efficient. But if you force me to pick, I would not be able to go against Duke given their matchup advantages. I would be looking for like a 6. Don't think we're going to get it. So it'll probably just end up being a pass for me. Next up, one I do have a lot of interest in is Clemson taking on Baylor. We were sort of on an island with Clemson in the first round, playing New Mexico, a team I did love. It was a very, very challenging game to pick. but we end up getting the win with Clemson in that game. They're just a team that's underrated right now, and rightfully so. They've lost a couple games they should have won during the regular season, played a conference in the ACC that's relatively weak, and now they face Baylor, who's an imbalanced team, similar to like an Alabama. This Baylor team excels on offense. They're top 10. They struggle on defense. They're 78th there. Clemson is slightly more balanced. They're a little better on defense, slightly worse on offense than Baylor, but their roster is actually pretty complete. They stand up well against Baylor, who does have height. They just don't use it very well. Messi on the inside when he's not fouling constantly, which is a big problem. They have been somewhat effective, and Bridges plays more year 4. But now you're contending with Clemson, who's 34th in height. They have Shiflin and PJ Hall inside, so you have more depth than previous. And this team has Jack Clark back, who missed about half the season with injury. He's now back for this Clemson team. Interior scoring should be an advantage when you look at Baylor's roster. They're 244th at interior defense, Clemson 38th at interior scoring. We mentioned Shiflin, PJ Hall, Jack Clark. Those are among their 3 best players. I think probably their best players. Don't think all that highly of Joe Girard. Now, Baylor does have advantages too. They're not as good interior scoring, but they rank 4th in the country in 3-point percentage. Clemson's 183 defending that area of the floor. So you have matchup advantages for both of these teams. When you get down into some of the nitty-gritty stuff, I do think there's a little bit more problems in some of the ancillary categories for Baylor. They turn the ball over a lot. They're in foul trouble more often than Clemson. So there's little things. Clemson's the far better free throw shooting team. They're 8th in the country. Baylor's 95th. So you're getting a lot of points here. I would take this down through about a 3. And right now you can find Clemson at 4.5 widely available. So this is one we will take. Next up, Grand Canyon takes on Alabama. Fun game here. I fell asleep in Grand Canyon's game, but I saw they rolled St. Mary's with no problems. Alabama rolled Charleston with really no problems. But this is a game where you can find spreads really across the board depending on what side of the game you're on. And I mean, I'm just looking at Odd Shopper right now. You can find Grand Canyon's plus 6.5. You can find Bama's minus 5.5. We'll talk about that part in a little bit, but the first place I want to go is the under. Grand Canyon 139th in pace. Alabama is 13th in pace. So right away, you'd think this lines up to an over. But Grand Canyon does struggle to score somewhat outside of Ty and Grant Foster, who's awesome. But they're 79th in offensive efficiency, 101st in effective field goal percentage, 152 in 3-point percentage. They're 96th at interior scoring. That's really where Bama's been pretty giving, is in their front court. They're 214th defending that area. Grand Canyon's not great defending that area themselves, but then they stand up on defense pretty well. You look at this team, they don't generate a lot of turnovers, but they play pretty sound half-court defense. They're 10th in interior defense, 97th at defending the 3. So if this plays in more of your half-court game, Grand Canyon is a team, I think, that can slow this down a little bit for Bama and play at a slower pace. And I think I might have said the wrong turnover numbers. They're 240 or 224 in turnovers committed. They're 38th in turnovers for. So just another area where they're pretty good on defense. Also 6th in the country in terms of fouls generated. Bama sometimes has a problem with fouls committed. But anyway, with pacing being a little slower for Bama, that's the first place I lean, is just straight up and under. I'm not sure Grand Canyon has the effective field goal percentage to sit and trade with Bama. And then as far as some of those lines we mentioned, if you force me to just take, I guess, a side in this game, it's probably going to be on the Bama side, given some of their effective field goal numbers. And to bring you to our live odds screen on Odd Shopper, we'll show you this firsthand. So right now, this is our live odds screen. As you can see, there are Alabama minus 5.5. It's juiced 115. And then you can find plus 6.5 pretty readily available. The 5.5s are available on BetMGM, 6.5, so you can get way easier across the market. But our live odds screen also gives a little more value on the Grand Canyon side at that plus 6.5. I think that makes some sense too. As far as the rest of the tools we have at Odd Shopper, we have all sorts of sports betting tools to help you find plus EV bets across sports, NHL, NBA, player props, whatever it is you like. And it takes a market-based approach. There will be a lot of plus EV bets in, player props. Right now we're looking at sides and totals, which typically aren't the most efficient to look at, but we talk about them for the content, and we think we can find an edge through the analysis anyway. But we also have our Discord included. I'm in there, Ben's in there. We're talking all these bets, how we're using the tools, and it's interactive, so you can ask questions. The link is below if you'd like to try it out. It's $14.95 for your first week, $49.95 for your first month. No long-term commitments. And now it's the best time of year, so check it out. All right, so largely just looking at the under in that Bama game as the preferred play. And let's move on to our next contest. We have Northwestern taking on UConn. Hinted at this game previously, having a tough time with UConn and Purdue in the betting markets, just getting these wide spreads. Honestly, if you force me to pick it, I'd probably take the points with Northwestern, but they're going to be at severe disadvantages. 2 major injuries for this team. No Ty Berry, no Nicholson. They're still fairly tall, so you see Northwestern 115th in height. And then UConn comes in 27th, of course. That's Klingon. But, man, this UConn team is just so good. First in offense, 11th in defense, 6th in effective field goal percentage, 6th at interior scoring, 6th at interior defense, 30th in three-point percentage. The only area where Northwestern has the edge in any of these categories is from 3, where they're 4th in the country in three-point percentage, tied with a couple other teams. They're rebounding. The gap is extremely wide. But ultimately, this is a lot of points, and Northwestern has played some pretty solid competition, even with their injuries. We just saw them upset FAU in the opening round and handle Golden, who's another big himself. I don't think quite as skilled as Klingon, but still really good. And then as far as this UConn team goes, I don't think Northwestern gets the upset or anything here. Outside of Klingon, your guard play is excellent. UConn has amazing shooters with Caravan, Cam Spencer, Tristan Newton running the point, Castle when he comes in, like Diarra. They're so deep. But to me, 14.5 is a lot against a competent opponent in Northwestern that's played other really good teams, brought Purdue to overtime. I mean, this team, they're awesome. Unfortunately, they're hurt, so we don't quite have full strength Northwestern, but I think we can still look at them here. Another 1 seed, Texas A&M takes on Houston. This one, I do like a Texas A&M team, and it's not because of their performance against Nebraska. Like, holy smokes. I diss Texas A&M pretty hard for being the 3rd worst shooting team in the field, and I think we saw their best shooting performance all year, including practice, warm-ups, everything. The team scored over 90 points against Nebraska. Twofold, Nebraska's got to defend, but man, Texas A&M ran hotter than the sun. Total was in the 140s. Now they face Houston, really slow team, 349th in pace. A&M is 286th. The value of the points is going to be key here. This game is going to play with a snail's pace. We've talked A&M a lot. I'll rehash these numbers. This is the 3rd worst shooting team in the field. They're 345th in effective field goal percentage. Houston's not a ton better. They're 229th. These teams essentially play the exact same way. Really good defense. Neither can shoot. They're reliant on offensive rebounds and then putbacks. You have Texas A&M 1st in the country in offensive rebounding. Houston's 12th. This leads to a lot of problems and volatility, especially when you play slow. First of all, you leave yourself open to offensive fouls. This is a problem for Houston more than A&M. They're 326th in fouls committed, but it's a problem for both. And then you still need to hit the putback. You're not a good shooting team, so that's not a given either. With Houston, you're dealing with a ton of injuries, not just Roberts, who got banged up in the conference tournament. He played in their opening round, kind of a cameo appearance, but he should be good to go. Your depth has been depleted. No Arsenault, he's been out for the year. Tugler went down, which is a real problem in your front court. Houston not at full strength. And Texas A&M actually has pretty good guards to take on Shed, Sharp, and that's going to be Wade Taylor and Tyrese Radford. Pretty good guards. So to me, with 2 teams that kind of do the exact same thing in a hyper slow game environment, 2 good rebounding teams with fouls being an issue on both sides, just give me the points with Texas A&M, a team who's beaten some of the best competition but has had some of the most head-scratching losses. That just comes when you're a terrible shooting team. Sometimes you win games you shouldn't, and a lot of times you lose games that you should be winning, but that's the story of the season for this A&M team. Getting the points, we'll take them here. Last up, we go to Yale taking on San Diego State. Fun game. Yale gets the upset over Auburn, who saw Jalen Williams get banged up early in the game. Chad Baker Mazzara gets thrown out. It is what it is. Yale played really well and got the job done. Now they face San Diego State, who I think is a pretty bad matchup for them. I'm not going to take this game myself. I debated talking myself into Yale. Just, again, value the points. 2 really slow teams. Yale 323. San Diego State 262 in terms of pace. But, man, this is a bad matchup for Yale, who's fairly tall with Wolf on the inside. but you're just banging in there with Ledee, who's one of the most physical bigs in the country, the best player in San Diego State. They're awesome at rebounding. They actually edge Yale there, so it's a pretty bad matchup for them. On the interior, Yale's still 99th in defensive interior, field goal percentage allowed. San Diego State's better in that area. When you look at three-point defense, San Diego State's 20th, Yale's 202. Now, San Diego State can't shoot. They're 301 in three-point percentage, but I mean, still being bad at three-point defense, you'd rather be good. As far as just the strengths of these two teams, when you have kind of strength on strength in Ledee being such an absolute monster that he is downside, we literally saw him kind of daddy Yaxel Lendenberg for UAB, which surprised me. Yaxel had some success in the second half, but man, San Diego State was awesome with Ledee inside, drawing a ton of fouls. They're 22nd in fouls drawn. They don't really commit as many fouls as you might think, and if they do, this team is still pretty deep, playing a deep rotation that we saw last year. And then last thing, they're the better team in terms of turnover margin. So I think there's a lot of little micro advantages for San Diego State. If you force me to take the game, it would be with the Aztecs, but this will be probably one I stay away from as we close this out. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them below or reach out to me on Twitter at @_Gajewski. We'll be back with some Sweet 16 Elite 8 stuff, but until then, good luck, everyone. We will see you next time.